Good evening, and welcome to the 2024 Digger Debate Series. My name is Neil Goswami, and I'm the managing editor of VTDigger. Every 2 years, we have the opportunity to introduce you to those vying for Vermont's top political offices and to ask them questions on your behalf. It's a key part of our mission, which is to, quote, produce rigorous journalism that explains complex issues, promotes public accountability, and fosters democratic and civic engagement, unquote. Tonight, we'll hear from the leading candidates for Vermont's sole seat in the U.S. House. On Wednesday at 7 p.m., we'll hold our final debate of the campaign season, featuring candidates for U.S. Senate and co-hosted by Vermont Public. For more details and to submit questions for the Senate candidates, please visit VTDigger.org. There, you'll find our 2024 election guide, which includes key information about how to vote and who's on the ballot. None of this would be possible without you, our readers and donors. VTDigger is supported by 9,000 people a year, people who make it possible for us to provide the public service journalism that connects our state. Please help continue this public service by visiting vtdigger.org/donate and contributing tonight. Before I introduce the candidates and moderators, I'll first run through the rules of this debate. We'll start by asking the candidates questions written by our moderators and our readers. Candidates will generally have 90 seconds to respond. The moderators may pose brief follow-ups or, at their discretion, allow the opposing candidate to respond. We'll generally allow a candidate who is named or invoked by their opponent to respond. Such follow-ups and responses will be limited to 30 seconds. Twice during the debate, we'll ask both candidates to pose a question to one another. Near the close of the debate, we'll also have a brief lightning round during which candidates will answer questions in just a few words and will conclude with closing statements. Our moderators will be timing answers. They'll hold up a yellow card when there's 15 seconds remaining and a red card when time is up. Both candidates have agreed to our request that they behave in a civil and respectful manner throughout the debate. We will not tolerate disrespectful behavior toward one another, the moderators, or anybody else. If a candidate does not abide by these expectations, they may be warned or, depending on the severity, removed from the debate. Let's conduct this forum the way Vermonters expect us to. I now have the pleasure of introducing our candidates and moderators. First, we are joined by Representative Becca Balint, a Democrat running for a second term representing Vermont in Congress. A former teacher and writer, Representative Balint previously served in the Vermont Senate, including as its president pro tempore. Challenging her is Mark Coester, a logger and small business owner. He is the Republican and Libertarian nominee for the U.S. House. Finally, I'd like to introduce our moderators. Sarah Meerhoff is VTDigger's State House Bureau Chief, and Paul Heinz is VTDigger's Editor-in-Chief. Sarah, take it away.
Thanks so much, Neil. We will begin this evening with questions for both candidates, some of which have been submitted by VTDigger readers. You will both have 90 seconds to answer. First, let's start with the economy. By many conventional measures, GDP, consumer spending, job creation, wage growth, economists say that the U.S. economy is doing very well. But in poll after poll, a majority of Americans say that the economy is poor or on the wrong track. How do you think the U.S. economy is doing, and how do you account for the disconnect? We'll start with you, Mr. Coester.
Sorry, that I was muted. The disconnect between the polling on the economy and what people are actually facing on the ground?
Yes.
Well, the polling is obviously bogus. Every citizen knows that. What more do you need to know?
The polling is bogus, the polling which shows that Americans think the economy is going poorly?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
yes.
What do you think the state of the economy is?
Suffering. While I was gathering signatures to run for office, one lady working and a local car dealership very gladly signed my petition and said, why is everybody fighting? We're all broke. And it's only getting worse. It's been heading downhill for quite a number of years. So, I mean, it started right away when the price of fuel went to $5 a gallon and the price of all the other commodities went up. And then all of a sudden eggs were $8 a dozen. Yes, people are hurting. They're hurting badly. So.
Thank you. Representative Balint, how do you think the economy is doing, and how do you disconnect between, or account for the disconnect, between the data and perceptions?
Really appreciate the question, Sarah. This is something that we talk about a lot in the Budget Committee, which is one of the two committees that I serve on. And by all the metrics that we can measure, not just here in the United States, but when you look globally, the United States has recovered to a better extent than to just any other westernized nation. But you're right, it's not connecting with voters. People are still feeling like costs are too high. And I just want to say one of the things that we looked at, I was on the Oversight Committee before I was placed on the Judiciary Committee, and we looked at price collusion around eggs, around meat packers. And so we have a very small number of companies and industries that are able to control the market. So that's part of it. But I'm really looking at how do we decrease costs across the board. So that's one of the reasons why I support moving towards Medicare for all, making sure that we have affordable insurance, reducing the cost of prescription drugs. I have a housing bill I introduced to increase the supply of housing, which we also know is driving up the prices. But it's a challenging thing for any person running for office right now, because you understand that you are in the midst of a second Gilded Age. You know, I'm somebody who studied history for a long time. We are seeing economic inequality now in the same way that we saw it in the 1920s, and that's real. And so we have to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to reduce prices for the middle class. And that's what I've been working on, and I'm going to continue to work on if I'm reelected.
Thank you. On to our next question. Inflation has slowed significantly from a high of more than 9% year over year in June of 2022 to around 2.5% this September. However, the cost of everyday goods, particularly food and gas, remains at least 20% higher than prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, a rate of increase the U.S. has not seen in decades. Experts have blamed a variety of factors for this, including supply chain disruptions caused by COVID and the federal response to the pandemic during both the Trump and Biden administrations. What do you think caused the spike in inflation, and what should the U.S. government do now to continue to rein in inflation? Representative, we'll start with you.
So it's clear that in the midst of the pandemic, obviously, as you said, Sarah, we did have issues with supply chains globally. We also had certainly issues related to the number of people in the workforce that was driving costs as well. And the increasing costs of insurance are actually one of the biggest drivers for inflation right now and higher costs on Vermonters. I think the challenge is we have to go after, as I alluded to before, we have to go after some of the big players in the market that are driving up costs. And I did a little research this afternoon looking at when you look at the increase in costs related to the cost of fuel, for example, or some of the drivers around the supply chain, there is, of course, some inflation related to that. But when you look at the record profits, specifically if you look at the grocery industry, when you look at the record profits that they made, it's far above and beyond any of the inputs that went in to that inflationary pressure that we saw during and right after the pandemic. And I think it's critically important that we in the House of Representatives use our oversight to go after these players, because it isn't enough to say, oh, well, it is the cost of energy driving it up, or it's the supply chain. We know that people are raking in money hand over fist, and it's hurting people in the pocketbooks.
Really quick follow-up, Representative Balint. Yeah. When you say insurance, are you referring to health insurance?
Yes, thank you for that clarification. When you look at some of the cost drivers here in Vermont, one of the biggest ones is the health insurance rates. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you. Mr. Coester, what do you think caused the spike in inflation, and what should we be doing to keep it in check? You have 90 seconds.
I don't call it inflation. I call it currency devaluation. Since 1981, when I lived here and paid my rent at $125 a month, $25 a week in groceries and $10 a week in gas, we have 1,000% currency devaluation since that time. Everything else is 10 times more. Now, they pulled this trick in Mexico just prior to when I went into Mexico. The Mexican government decided to devalue the currency overnight. All the rich people and the government officials put all their pesos into US dollars. They devalued the peso 1,000%, bringing it from 300 pesos to $1 to 3,000 pesos to $1 overnight. They've done the same thing to us in America over a 40-year period, and they call it inflation. So the more money you print and dump into the economy, the less the dollar is worth. That's the bottom line.
Just to be clear, are you saying that inflation is driven by Americans moving money offshore? I'm just a little unclear. 30
I
seconds.
said it's currency devaluation. It's intentional. My family lived in Germany when a loaf of bread was 1,000,000 Deutschmarks for a loaf of bread. Things can get a lot worse than they are now. I was trying to buy land at a 25% interest rate living here in Vermont. You know, things can be a lot worse than they are. And on the path that we're on, it isn't going to get better under the current administration or any of the policies that they're pushing.
Okay, thank you both. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Sarah. We'll now turn to a pretty existential topic, democracy in the United States. One of the first duties of the next Congress will be to certify the results of the 2024 election. Mr. Coester, days before the violent attacks on the Capitol on January 6, 2021, you signed a letter authored by Bob Orlick calling on then Vice President Mike Pence to overturn the outcome of the 2020 election. Do you continue to believe that Donald Trump won that election? How can Vermonters trust you to uphold the outcome of the 2024 election?
I think that's false information. I did not sign any letter. Show me where I signed any letter.
Your name is one of many listed under a letter that was drafted by Bob Orlick, who's a fellow Vermont Republican.
I do not know Bob Orlick. Show me the proof. I believe it's false accusations.
I'll read from you just a brief section of this letter. Quote, "The forces at work to destroy our republic are on the march and they must be stopped on January 6th. We will be there for you on Wednesday, and we will be with you for all the days after and for as long as it takes." And so you're telling me that you did not, in fact, sign that letter.
I said to show me the proof that my signature is on that letter.
And my question to you is, did you sign that letter or did you
not?
not?
No, sir, I did not.
Okay. Do you believe that Joe Biden won the 2020 election?
He was certified.
Do you believe he won the election?
The information and the data was skewed. He was certified by the government. Was it fair? I don't believe it was fair.
The data was skewed?
Well, yes, the data was somewhat skewed. People did question the election as they have a right to. Democrats questioned elections for more than 20 years. It was certified, but I don't believe it was a fair election.
So to be clear, pretty much every authority there is on the matter, from the federal government to state governments to the courts to independent experts, all agree that Joe Biden won the 2020 election. Sounds like you disagree with that. So I'll move to the second part of the question, which is, that being the case, how can Vermonters trust you to uphold the outcome of the 2024 election if you do not think that the rightful winner of the 2020 election, in fact, won?
You've twisted that. I do not disagree that he won. It was certified. I said it wasn't fair. Did you actually report yourself on the Hunter Biden laptop in October of 2020?
Thank you. Representative Balint, if former President Trump wins the 2024 election, will you vote to certify the outcome? And under what circumstances would you decline to do so?
No, I will certify the election if the former president wins the election. I know from having worked in state government and working with our Secretary of State, as well as all the town clerks across the country, across the state, that in each state, the poll workers, the election workers, they are doing the work of the people. And so, yes, if Donald Trump is successful in getting the most votes and wins the Electoral College, absolutely. Will I be sad that my candidate didn't win? Absolutely. Will I certify? Absolutely. No question.
Thank you, Representative Balint. A couple follow-ups on this one. At a panel discussion with the National Association of Black Journalists in July, former President Trump pledged that he would, quote, absolutely, unquote, pardon those who have been convicted for violently breaching the Capitol on January 6th, 2021. Mr. Coester, do you believe that those who stormed the Capitol that day have been fairly prosecuted? Should they be pardoned? You've got 30 seconds.
I don't think this is at all fair. I don't care for your format. If you need a cure for your Trump derangement syndrome, you could evict him from living rent-free in your head.
I appreciate that advice. The question was, do you believe those who stormed the Capitol that day have been fairly prosecuted? Should they be pardoned?
Every case is individual by individual. Whether or not it was prosecuted fairly is up to the discretion of the courts. It should be re-examined. There was a lot of false information presented, as we've seen in all the video footage released by the House Oversight Committee.
Thank you. Representative Balint, do you believe that those who participated in the January 6th insurrection have been fairly prosecuted? Do you believe that they should be pardoned?
No, I do not believe they should be pardoned. I believe they've been fairly prosecuted, and many people have not been prosecuted. They have gone through the process, they have gotten their time in court, and they have not been prosecuted. The people who have been prosecuted and are serving time should be serving time. And we should not be calling them patriots, and we should not be calling them hostages. I find it incredibly offensive.
Final question on this general topic. There's been a noticeable increase in politically motivated attacks in recent years, from a shooter targeting members of Congress during a baseball practice in 2017 to a neo-Nazi driving a van into a crowd of counter-protesters in Charlottesville, Virginia that same year. And of course, this year, there have been 2 assassination attempts on former President Trump. As a major party nominee running to represent Vermont in Congress, what are each of you doing to turn down the temperature of political rhetoric? I'll start with you, Representative Balint, and then turn to Mr. Coester. You have 30 seconds.
I really appreciate the question, Paul. I think about this a lot. And one of the things that I've done recently is meet with a woman named Donna Hicks, who studies dignity violations. And she has been working with a team on what's called a dignity index, looking at the kind of rhetoric that people are using on Republican Democrats are using, and making sure the language that they're using on social media is not fanning the flames of anger and fear and dissension. And that is something that I take very seriously. I don't always get it right, but I am committed to bringing down the temperature. I don't think it's healthy for the country.
Mr. Coester, what are you doing to turn down the temperature?
Excuse me? The temperature of what?
So the full question was, as a major party nominee running to represent Vermont in Congress, what are you doing to turn down the temperature of political rhetoric?
I do my absolute best not to feed into the hatred and animosity of either party. I haven't been bashing Democrats. I haven't been bashing the Republicans. You know, there are problems on both sides. Both sides historically have created problems to sell us solutions.
Thank you. We will now shift our attention from Washington, D.C. to the Middle East. More than a year after Hamas launched a surprise attack on Israel, killing more than 1,100 people and kidnapping roughly 250, Israel's war in Gaza continues with no end in sight. According to the Associated Press, citing the Gaza Health Ministry, roughly 42,000 Palestinians have been killed in the conflict, half of them women and children. Representative Balint, you voted against major aid packages to Israel, citing your opposition to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's conduct of the war. What else do you think Congress can and should do to achieve your aims? You have 90 seconds.
So first and foremost, I know a lot of Vermonters have heard the expression, the Leahy Law, and I thought I would take a moment here to just explain. We have a law in the books that says that we should not be selling arms or giving aid, military aid, to any country that has a security force that is violating human rights. And we should be holding Israel, our ally, to the same standard that every single other country is held to. And I believe that that has not always been the case, and we have to do better. I also believe that it is critically important that we do use our power. I have recently signed a letter to sanction Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, two of the most extreme members of the Netanyahu cabinet, who are continuing to fan hatred in the West Bank and have recently said they want to rebuild Gaza for Israelis. And we have to hold Netanyahu to the same standards we hold every other ally, period.
Thank you. Mr. Coester, do you agree with Representative Balint's votes this year against providing billions of dollars in military aid to Israel? Why or why not?
No, I don't agree with her. In our previous debate, she was very much promoting what was called a Senate border bill, which was 86% of foreign aid package, 49% of that to the Ukraine, 19% of it to Israel, others to Turkey, very little to come to America. So she is not telling the truth about trying to block aid. She was actually promoting this foreign aid package disguised as a border bill.
Representative Balint, you were mentioned in that answer, so if you'd like to respond, you may in 30 seconds.
Yeah, so there was a decision made by the House of Representatives, Speaker Johnson, to split the funding bills apart. So there was a Ukraine funding bill and there was an Israel funding bill. And you are incorrect, Mr. Coester. I was one of approximately 30 members of the House of Representatives that did not vote to send military aid to Israel last spring. And I'm on the record and it's easy to check.
Anything else on that, Mr. Coester?
That is false information. That was a Senate border bill that she was promoting. It did never go to the House. That's the one they claimed that Donald Trump quashed. He did not. The only bill that actually passed for a border bill was H.R. 2, which has been sitting on Chuck Schumer's desk for 525 days. So, you know, you can promote money to Israel even though it was never in the House. And that's what she was doing.
Mr. Coester, it is very clear by my record that I did not vote for the Israel aid package this spring. It was offensive weapons. It was not related to Iron Dome or David Sling defensive weapons. I don't know what you're referring to, but this is very easy to check.
Yeah, yes.
I'm going to cut that off right there, Mr. Coester. We have another follow-up question, but I will note that the question that, or the vote that Representative Balint is referring to took place on April 19th of this year. And in fact, it was, the bill was split up into several different parts. So you can read about it more on VTDigger.org, which I would encourage all of our viewers to do. One more follow-up question in this general realm. In recent weeks, tensions between Israel and Iran have dramatically escalated following an Iranian missile attack on Israel earlier this month, itself in response to the killing of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. Israel is widely believed to be planning retaliatory strikes on Iran. How far can and should Israel go in defending itself? Should the U.S. support Israeli airstrikes on Iranian military, nuclear, or energy production facilities? Mr. Coester, you will have 30 seconds for this one.
Oh, I thought I was muted. Run that by me again, please.
Sure. Just to summarize, the question is essentially, should the U.S. support Israeli airstrikes on Iranian military, nuclear, or energy production facilities?
No, I don't believe that we should be supporting airstrikes on Iranian targets, but that doesn't mean that Israel won't do it. There is no negotiation happening with the current administration in anything whatsoever. It's just a free-for-all. It's very sad the way things have evolved.
Thank you, sir. Representative Balint, how far can and should Israel go in a potential attack on Iran? Should the U.S. support Israeli airstrikes on military, nuclear, or energy production facilities?
I think that would have a devastating impact on the region. We do not want a full-scale war in the Middle East. It would destabilize not just Israel, not just Gaza and Lebanon, but all of our partners in the region. And so we have to do everything that we can to be bringing the temperature down right now. I've been very concerned in the last few weeks that the former president has been having direct conversations with Prime Minister Netanyahu. And Sarah, I see that I'm almost out of time. And that is against the Logan Act. And I think it's a dangerous situation.
Thank you very much. I will turn it back to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Paul. In June of 2022, the U.S. Supreme Court voted 6-3 to overturn Roe versus Wade precedent, ending the national right to an abortion. In your view, was this the right decision? Should Congress pass legislation to reestablish the right to an abortion at the federal level? Mr. Coester, we'll start with you. You have 90 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely not. Ruth Bader Ginsburg wanted it to go back to the states. It went back to the states. That's the fairest thing. Anything regulating something like this is not within the powers granted by the states to the federal government. Nobody should mess with it. Let each and every state deal with that situation on their own.
So you're saying that Congress should not
is in perfectly good shape. There's no threat to any women in their abortions in Vermont. It shouldn't even be an election topic.
Well, nationwide, the landscape is such that several states have outright banned abortion ever since.
The federal government has no business interfering with what states are doing. It is not within the powers granted by the states to the federal government per the 10th Amendment of the Constitution. Now, if you swear an oath to uphold the Constitution, you follow that oath to the Constitution. You don't try to interfere with what's going on.
So it sounds like you do think that the decision was correct to overturn Roe versus Wade. Am I correct there?
It is not pertinent what my opinion was on that. What the law and the Constitution states is that is not within the power of the federal government to deal with that.
Okay, thank you. Representative Balint, you next, 90 seconds. Should Congress pass legislation to reestablish the right to an abortion at the federal level?
Absolutely, no question. And, to Mr. Coester's argument that this does not impact Vermonters, I hear from parents every day that I am out campaigning saying to me, I am looking at where my daughters can go to school to make sure they're getting the health care that they need and deserve. And so I find it shocking that you would say that it doesn't impact Vermonters. It absolutely does. The government has no business being in a doctor's office trying to make a decision about a woman's body. I see that you're laughing, and it's shocking to me that you think this is such a funny situation, because you have right now in states across this country. I read about one earlier today when young women who are sexually abused are forced to give birth, underage, 13-year-olds, people not getting the health care that they need and deserve. It's not a laughing matter at all. And I think it's very revealing to me that you don't seem to show the compassion and the understanding for each person's bodily autonomy and human dignity. I find it shocking.
Mr. Coester, since you were invoked, would you like 30 seconds to respond to that? Do you have a response?
Well, you have facts, you have fear, you have feelings. The facts are that the government has absolutely no business getting in between, especially the federal government has no business getting in between a patient and their doctor. Becca Balint tried to go round and round with me about this on the previous debate. The federal government has no business getting involved between a patient and a doctor, per the 10th Amendment of the Constitution. So I'm laughing because she's trying to pull the same stunt she did with Vermont Public. I do not support the federal government involvement between any patient and a doctor at any time whatsoever.
Representative Balint, I want to stick with you, since you did say that the Congress should pass a bill reestablishing the nationwide access to abortion. I'm wondering, in 30 seconds, what would that look like? Do you think it's enough to restore the protections of Roe versus Wade, or do you think that that bill should go further if it were to pass?
Well, look, I am dealing with the reality on the ground. I want to reestablish what we had before as a floor. Absolutely. Look, here's the other piece, Sarah, if I could have a few minutes. It is not just about codifying Roe. It's about what Republicans have said they're going to do through Project 2025, which is to outlaw the mailing of mifepristone, which is a safe, effective medication used in abortion. So they're not just talking about procedures in a doctor's office or a hospital. They're talking about restricting access to a safe medical, a medicine that has been shown to be safe. And I don't think it's funny.
Okay, Mr. Coester, I have a follow-up for you as well, particularly since you said that you don't believe the federal government should be getting involved in these doctors' offices. In January of 2023, House Republicans introduced the Life at Conception Act, which would establish the, quote, right to life of each born and pre-born human person, unquote. The bill defines a human being as a, quote, member of the species Homo sapiens at all stages of life, including the moment of fertilization or cloning, unquote. How would you vote on such a bill if it were to come to the House floor and you would be serving in Congress? You have 30 seconds.
Well, first, I would have to read the bill. The second question would be, did it pass? Because the Republicans had the House majority then, right? Did it actually pass? So that's pretty much grouping all Republicans into a category. Who introduced it? I don't believe it's legal by the Constitution.
So that sounds like a no, that you would vote no on that?
I would have to look at the bill. You can quote the numbers and whatever you say about it. I would have to look at the bill and read the bill. That's one of the reasons they made one bill, one topic, one bill with 72 hours to read it. You can't make a decision without actually looking at it. I do not believe the federal government should be involved in that one way or the other.
Okay, thank you. And one last question along the topic of reproductive rights. In February, the Alabama State Supreme Court issued a decision defining frozen embryos as people in a wrongful death lawsuit filed against a fertility clinic. The decision threw into question the future legality of in vitro fertilization, also known as IVF, both in Alabama and beyond. As recently as last month, Senate Republicans, for the second time this year, blocked a Democrat-sponsored bill establishing the nationwide right to IVF treatments. How would you vote on that issue? Mr. Coester, you have 30 seconds.
I believe that IVF is a favorable thing. That's what I believe.
So how would you vote on that bill if you were in Congress?
Senate, who introduced it and who blocked it?
Democrats in the Senate introduced the bill, and Republicans in the Senate, they were not able to meet the 60-40 filibuster margin.
Right, right. They're playing games. You know, both sides, Democrats and Republicans, they keep the war going rather than they would rather have the war continue so that people can be divided and keep fighting. Right? They both do it. Both sides do it. You've got your far right radical right, you've got your far left radical left, and always somebody will block something so that you can blame the entire party, you know, to keep the war and the divide going, where most people have common values. I believe IVF is a good thing.
Okay. Representative Balint, how would you vote on whether to establish a nationwide right to IVF treatments? 30 seconds. I believe you're muted.
Thank you. That's an easy one, absolutely. And I was very frustrated that the Senate bill did not pass, because we are talking about codifying and giving clarity to families across the nation. And this decision threw so many families into turmoil, not knowing if they were going to be able to go forward with IVF treatment. So absolutely, I would support it.
Thank you. Next question, Representative Balint. During your 2022 primary campaign, disgraced cryptocurrency fraudster Sam Bankman-Fried and his allies spent more than $1 million in an effort to get you elected. They did so through tens of thousands of dollars in direct donations to your campaign and through a massive contribution to a super PAC that blitzed Vermont with advertisements supporting you. You have said that you had no knowledge or involvement in this effort to get you elected. However, your campaign engaged in a tactic known as red boxing during the primary campaign. That is when you signal through your website what messages you'd like super PACs to send on your behalf. Do you regret courting this kind of support, and what have you done to make it right?
Appreciate the question. So two things. At the top, I want to make sure people understand all the donations that came in from Sam Bankman-Fried or any of his associates have been put into separate accounts, and we are fully cooperating with law enforcement in the Southern District of New York and have never been accused of any wrongdoing. That's really important for people to understand. The other thing, the independent expenditure that was made on my behalf was not able to tell them not to spend on it. I had no knowledge that they were going to be doing that. And yes, if I could go back, absolutely. I am not happy that that is something that happened in my campaign. And I have taken it very seriously to think about cryptocurrency and the ways in which it can have a corrupting influence on elections. And so I have sponsored several bills looking at election integrity. I've also made sure that I did not support bills that unregulated the cryptocurrency industry. And I also voted against bills that would weaken the ability of the Security and Exchange Commission to go after bad actors within the cryptocurrency industry. And so I think that this is a very serious issue, not just for this industry, but others. We have to get dark money out of politics. No question. No question. It's not healthy for democracy.
Okay, thank you. Another question along these lines of follow-up for you. The super PAC through which Bankman-Fried's allies funneled more than $1 million was the LGBTQ plus Victory Fund. When your 2022 Democratic primary opponent, Molly Gray, cried foul about the outside spending, your campaign manager told VTDigger, quote, "Molly Gray is very close to saying, you know, we don't want a gay agenda," unquote. Knowing what you know now about the true origin of that money, do you regret your campaign lodging such an attack on your opponent? You have 30 seconds.
Appreciate the question, Sarah. Primaries are hard. And things get said in the heat of a campaign that are not the ways in which we would conduct ourselves in other situations. And Molly Gray and I have had numerous conversations since the election. And I think Molly is an incredibly talented and smart person who I think has a future in politics. And we have had multiple sit downs since then. We understand that primaries are unfortunately uncomfortable and sometimes veer into territory that is not in keeping with my values. And I think that we always have regrets, of course, as humans. Do it better next time.
Sure. Thank you. Mr. Coester, we're going to have a question for you next, but just keeping with this topic in 30 seconds, I wonder what you might have to say about this episode with your election opponent and what you may make of it.
So she may not have been completely aware of what was going on. Who knows who did what within the campaign, within management. It isn't right. These things need to be straightened out. It is completely illegal to communicate with a super PAC or PAC in any way, shape, or form. The big trouble now is the small dollar donations that were laundered through Wells Fargo and ActBlue for many years, done with no CVV code necessary. And Wells Fargo was forced to start demanding a CVV code. But that was a lot of foreign election interference with that, and prepaid debit cards, et cetera, et cetera. And that's coming out. It's been being investigated for more than 2 years. So there's a big break on that today.
Okay, we have to move on.
Can I say one thing, Sarah? Because I think this is an area in which Mr. Coester and I agree. He talked about small dollar donations and the importance of small dollar donations. And I think it's very important that Vermonters know when we do have agreement. I think that is really important. And it is there is a bill that I introduced to try to protect small dollar donations to make sure that they were not collected fraudulently. And I know that's something, it sounds like, that we both care a lot about.
Great. We have to move on. Mr. Coester, I have a question for you specifically next. You have associated yourself online with the QAnon movement. And during your 2022 Senate campaign, you drove a logging truck in parades featuring the Pepe the Frog logo. That image has been adopted by the alt-right white supremacist movement. Do you believe in QAnon, and do you consider yourself a member of the alt-right? You have 90 seconds.
Absolutely not. There is no such thing. QAnon doesn't exist. But you can buy a membership and get 10% off if you're a member of the Flat Earthers too.
I'm a little unclear. Are you saying that QAnon is an unfounded theory, or that there is, because there is indeed a political movement online?
I gave a 15-minute interview to a Washington, D.C. media company on that in 22. I don't know whether it's a psyop or whether it's not. Okay, I didn't follow it. I never followed it. It was pretty much all done. But there was Q and then there were Anons. So the curiosity, the natural curiosity of Americans got people investigating, like by the millions. And those people never stopped investigating. They continue to this day. So whether it's a psyop or whether it's not, there are literally tens of millions of Americans and people around the world investigating every little thing. Now, you got a problem with Frog? I know you reported a bunch of BS in 22. I chose not to sue you because it was blatant lies and it was spread all around the state. So you might want to back off on that.
Are you saying that it was false reporting that you indeed had
100%
a frog on your truck, because that was documented?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. There's a frog on my truck. Whatever you interpret the frog to mean doesn't mean anything. Okay. And then you reported some other BS about this young man of color who climbed up on my log loader with flags of his own, right? And you joined in with Paul Dame, and they tried to say, oh my God, vote for the establishment candidates, because I was running as a Republican then too in Windham County. Vote for the establishment candidates rather than this guy, right? But I beat both of those establishment candidates without campaigning. So I really don't appreciate your reporting, and you should back off because I chose not to sue you.
Representative Balint, I'm wondering in 30 seconds what you may have to say about your opponent's association with these images and these movements online. You're muted.
One of the things that I don't know about what he had in the parade. What I will tell you is a couple of his endorsers are people who have participated in spreading misinformation, whether they're part of QAnon. I can't speak to that, but the fact that he's highlighted several endorsers on his campaign page, people who are not people that are trustworthy conveyors of information. It gives me pause.
Thank you. We have to move on from this topic. I'll turn it back to Paul.
Thank you, Sarah. We will now have an opportunity for candidates to ask each other questions. Each candidate may ask their opponent one question at this time. These should be questions and not speeches. You will have 90 seconds to answer. You may ask or allow follow-up questions. And Representative Balint, you may ask the first question.
Thank you, Paul. Mr. Coester, earlier this month when we debated, you said that there was no role for the federal government to address the housing crisis or to protect abortion access. What role do you see for members of Congress who serve in the federal government?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I asked a couple of young men in a restaurant this morning what they thought should be done on a federal level. Now, the first one answered close the border, right? But that really isn't the role of Congress. It isn't necessary for Congress to do that. All they have to do is follow the existing laws. The second one stated, I want to know where my money's going. I said, you mean transparency and accountability? It's like, yes. I want to know where my money's going, and maybe even create some legislation that I can choose where my tax money goes, because they bleed us dry. So, there are certain things the federal government shouldn't be doing, and there are things that the federal government should be doing.
And so, may I ask a follow-up, Paul?
You may ask one follow-up question. Yep, go ahead.
And so I understand you have a very narrow view of what the role of the federal government is, and I appreciate that's a philosophical difference that we have. Following your question, do you believe that the federal government has a role in things like Medicare or Social Security?
Medicare and Social Security are very important. I believe the Social Security will continue to be funded. The Medicare, it shouldn't be an all-encompassing thing of only Medicare. That's part of the problem why our health insurance costs are so high here in Vermont. I wouldn't try to create Medicare for all. That doesn't make sense. The cost would just go up and up and up. Competitive markets makes it better. In Vermont, we're losing another healthcare provider because Vermont.
I'm going to ask you to wrap it up, Mr. Coester, please.
Yep, go ahead.
Great, thank you. And we'll now turn to you to ask a question to Representative Balint.
Well, there are a great number of people in Vermont that really want to know why not only Becca, but Bernie and Peter Welsh voted against H.R. 5 and H.R. 734. H.R. 5 was the Parents' Bill of Rights, and H.R. 734 was protection of women and girls in sports.
Representative Balint, you have 90 seconds.
Well, I appreciate the question. And just to be clear, Mr. Coester, I don't have those pieces of legislation in front of me. I voted on 1,000 pieces of legislation, but I'm going to do my best. Okay. Starting with HR 734. Again, I don't have the text in front of me, but I do know from talking with Vermonters who are both the parents of trans kids, but also parents of kids who don't identify as trans. They have said to me repeatedly that every child should have the opportunity to participate in school sports, regardless of their gender identity. And so that's something that I don't just believe. Their Republican Governor Doug Cox of Utah has also said we should do everything that we can to make sure that every child has an opportunity to participate in sports. Now, when you're talking about at the competitive level, you have governing bodies for sports to make those determinations. But in terms of like making sure that school-age children can participate in sports regardless of their gender identity, I stand behind that.
And Mr. Coester, do you have a follow-up question for Representative Balint?
No, that's
okay.
I mean, there were two bills there. It's okay. People in Vermont are asking questions. They have a right to ask questions.
They sure do. They absolutely do, Mark. We do not disagree on that. And I think
the other one was HR 5, the Parents' Bill of Rights. I mean, I could put a link to it right in the text.
Well, I will tell you, again, I don't have it in front of me, but I will tell you this. I come to my job as not just as a legislator, but I come to it also as a parent myself. So all the decisions that I am making are as a legislator, as a former teacher, and as a parent, and making sure that we are respecting the rights of parents and also making sure that we have a supportive environment in schools in which parents and kids both feel welcome. So I will have to go back and look because I don't have the text in front of me.
Thank you.
We do a lot of messaging bills in the House of Representatives.
Thank you very much. We are getting close to time, but we want to sneak in a few more questions. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to ask 2 more questions from the moderators, and then we're going to go back to you each to ask 1 more question of one another. Then we'll go to the lightning round and wrap it up. So we're getting there. Sarah, I'm going to turn this back over to you for another question. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. We'll have another round of candidate questions in a bit. In response to devastating flooding in Vermont over the past 2 years, President Joe Biden has signed multiple major disaster declarations for the state, unlocking federal aid and mobilizing FEMA. But many Vermonters have not been made whole, and many municipalities are still waiting on federal aid from last year's floods. What specific reforms, if any, do you believe Congress should make to FEMA? Mr. Coester, we'll start with you. You have 90 seconds.
FEMA is bankrupt because they spent all their money on non-citizens.
On non-citizens?
Yes, FEMA spent all their money on non-citizens. They're completely bankrupt. There are people in North Carolina right now. I know Vermonters are hurting. They didn't get their money, so they got a little bit of money after a year for 23. The deadline to file for 24 is coming up soon. The response is atrocious. There are people that have been without power and have had no human contact for 22 days now in North Carolina. The stench of rotting corpses you can smell when you're approaching their area. It's absolutely horrific. And FEMA is building this huge camp for themselves to house their own people, right? Like, where's the response?
I'm curious what you, as a member of Congress, if you were to win this election, what you would do to institute reforms at the agency.
Transparency and accountability with every facet of the government is absolutely necessary. Where the money's going, how much is going where, it all has to be transparent and accountable. People want to know where their money's going. In Vermont, nationally, the money going overseas, people want to know where their money's going. They want to know why so many billions of dollars have gone overseas and there's nothing for the people in the Appalachians. And there's nothing for the people in Vermont. It's slow to come. We dealt with Irene here. I mean, Irene
Mr.
is
Coester, I'm
small.
sorry, that's your time. We have to move to your opponent. Representative Balint, what reforms do you think Congress should make to FEMA?
So this is something that the two senators and I have spent a lot of time on since the horrific flooding of both last summer and this summer. And one of the things that we've learned from going out and talking to individuals and folks at the town government level is that we need navigators on the ground. Because what has happened in Vermont is that there have been sometimes families and businesses that have had to deal with multiple point people. And sometimes they have to start all over again. It's not acceptable. You should have one person following your case from beginning to end. And we talked to one woman in the Ludlow area who had talked to 7 different people. So not acceptable. We have to streamline the process. We have to make sure we have navigators on the ground. And we can't expect that small municipalities in Vermont are going to be funded in the same way that a big city is. And so we have to make sure that the decisions that are being made about how the money is spent is really being determined by the people on the ground that know their towns and villages better. We also have to fully fund FEMA, and I'm frustrated that we haven't gone back into Congress during October to make sure that we have more funds in FEMA. And the last thing they wanted to say is to make sure that the Small Business Administration, same thing. People need an easy way to get in the door and have one person following their case. My heart goes out to all the people that are still waiting for the funding. And I just want to say it is something that Bernie and Peter Welch and I take very seriously. We are on the phone with FEMA frequently to try to get this solved, but I know it's hard and frustrating.
Thank you both. Paul, next to you.
Thanks. And this will be our final moderator questions of the evening. Since she first ran for president in 2020, Vice President Kamala Harris has moved to the right on immigration, supporting significant new restrictions on asylum applications and providing new resources to secure the U.S.-Mexico border. At the same time, former President Trump has gone much further, vowing to conduct mass deportations, call on the National Guard to round up migrants, and even impose the death penalty on, quote, any migrant, unquote, who kills a U.S. citizen. Mr. Coester, do you agree with any of these proposals? What action would you take in Congress on immigration and border security? You'll have 90 seconds.
There are existing laws, and I completely agree with what Governor Scott had to say in Williston on Monday, that legal migration only. Follow the existing laws, legal migration only, through a port of entry, every single person vetted, straight up. I am the son of a legal migrant. My ex-wife was a legal migrant. I worked with asylum seekers from Vietnam. There was a whole family of them. And I did that in middle school. Legal migration only. Whatever Kamala, Trump, I don't know why you're bringing this in. There are laws in place. The border could have been closed right away. It's been left open intentionally through this entire administration. It's appalling what I've seen. I went to the border myself. I followed it since the beginning of 2021. I followed the people that went to Darien Gap. What's been going on is absolutely appalling, using women and children as a distraction so they can smuggle drugs in a different place while the Border Patrol are distracted by women and children. And then what happened to those women and children?
So So just to clarify, you do not support any of the proposed changes to the law on immigration and border security that have been put forward by either the vice president or the former president in this campaign, and you believe that the current laws in this realm should suffice. Is that correct?
First, you enforce the laws that already exist, and then you may make changes.
Thank you. Representative Balint, do you agree with any of the proposals that I named earlier from the two leading presidential candidates? What action would you take in the next Congress on immigration and border security, if any? And you'll have 90 seconds as well.
Okay. Thank you so much, Paul. First, I want to correct something that Mr. Coester said, because it's not true that we are having folks flooding over the border. When you look at the rates of people,
oh my God.
When you look,
Coester, please let Representative Balint finish her answer.
We are down to 2020 levels. We are down to 2020 levels. When you look at, we've had a 35% reduction of folks coming from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras specifically. That was something that Vice President Harris worked on, working directly with diplomatic and economic initiatives to reduce the number of people coming. So I needed to correct the record. It is not a wide open border, and it's just not true. So I do not believe that mass deportations are the humane thing to do. I also have talked to multiple farmers in Vermont who have said, if we don't have migrant workers in the ag industry, the farm industry collapses. They have said that, and they are not all Democrats. We need H-2A and H-2B visas. We need to make sure we lift the cap on those. There's so many things to get through. I do support a pathway to citizenship for DACA recipients. We need more asylum officers. And so if we're going to really address the issue of asylum seekers, we have to make sure that we're hiring more asylum officers and judges at the border to make sure that people can go through the process. I know I'm out of time. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. And Mr. Coester, Representative Balint mentioned you during her answer. So if you'd like, you can have 30 seconds to respond.
No, I'm going to let it ride.
All right. Very
misinformation,
time efficient.
disinformation, you know.
Thank you. One follow-up on this question, which Representative Balint alluded to just now. Vermont's dairy industry has long relied upon undocumented workers to do the extraordinarily hard work that keeps our farms in business. Do you believe such workers should be able to legally remain in this country, or do you believe they should be deported? Mr. Coester, we'll go to you first, and you've got 30 seconds.
It's not that big of a deal to get a work visa. People are allowed to come here. People come to Vermont all the time on a work visa. The farms all around where I live, people have come on work visas. They come to the ski areas. There's nothing wrong with that. They go to the coast of Maine, all throughout America. It's not that big of a deal. Non-citizens staying beyond their visa, I think they should renew their visa, follow the existing laws.
Representative Balint, you've already touched on this, but 30 seconds to respond to that question. Do you believe that Vermont's undocumented dairy workers should be able to legally remain in the country, or should they be deported?
Well, I just want to be really clear here. It's not easy, Mr. Coester. If it were easy, we wouldn't have such an incredible backlog. And so when I talk to people in industries across Vermont who say, actually, we would like more legal workers to come through both these visa programs, and they can't get them because of the red tape, because we don't have enough people working in government to make sure that we can get these people the visas they need. And so, you know, I would like us all to be able to find some common ground on immigration, because we desperately, desperately need the workers in Vermont.
Thank you. We will, I'll hand it back over to Sarah.
Excuse me. She invoked me in that.
Why don't you go ahead then, please?
Well, since 1981, we had 3,600 farms, dairy farms in the state of Vermont. Now we have only 600. We've lost 750 farms per decade. Who's protecting farmers? Nobody.
Thank you very much. We will now turn to the final round of candidate questions to one another. And Sarah, please kick that off.
Thanks, Paul. Same rules as before for this segment of the debate. Ask a question, avoid speeches, 90-second responses. Mr. Coester, you may ask the first question this time around.
Becca, how do you feel qualified to serve in the federal government when, as Senate Pro Tem in Vermont, you left Vermont with $9 billion in unfunded pensions for state workers?
Well, that is not true. I was part of the group of people who helped to solve the pension problem. And so I don't know what you're referring to, but it was something I worked on for an entire year with the Speaker of the House. We had a group that I helped pull together along with the Speaker to address the issue of pensions. We also had representatives from the executive branch. I believe Mike Pichek or somebody else may have served on that committee. And so I don't know what you're referring to. It's something I took very, very seriously. And I am somebody who holds a small teacher's pension and was committed to making sure that we were able to get a deal on that. So I'm confused about the question.
Thanks, Mr. Coester. Do you have a follow-up?
On that particular question?
That particular question, yes.
Well, I mean, it is factual that all the state workers' pensions are underfunded. It's a $9 billion deficit. All the state workers know that, especially the road crews.
It'll have to be a question, though, if you could.
It's really easy to track it down. How do you feel you're qualified to serve in Washington, leaving Vermont in that type of situation?
Representative Balint?
I'm good. No, thank you.
Thank you. Representative Balint, it's now your turn to pose a question to Mr. Coester.
Mr. Coester, Vermonters care deeply about the environment and addressing climate change, and experts around the world say that we have to make some bold investments in climate action to make sure that we are addressing climate change. And I'm wondering, what kind of climate action should the federal government be taking to address this urgent crisis?
I am aware of the folks at the World Economic Forum claiming that their carbon capture projects will cost over $50 trillion. How much of that $50 trillion the World Economic Forum plans to spend would get funneled out of the United States? As I said earlier in the evening, that people, Democrats and Republicans alike, create problems so they can sell you solutions, as with George Bush and his weapons of mass destruction. So this existential climate crisis that's the worst threat to the planet today, I believe, is blown out of proportion.
Follow up, if I could.
Please.
So I know, Mr. Coester, you're a logger, and I spent some time a couple of days ago with someone who runs a sawmill here in Vermont, and they talked about how climate change is absolutely impacting their ability to do their work because the ground isn't freezing as early, isn't staying frozen as long. They can't harvest the logs in the way. So from your perspective as a logger, do you not believe that climate change is real? Do you not see it in the work that you do?
Climate change is very most definitely real. At one point in history, I believe it was around the 1200s, there was a huge amount of people on Greenland that died. 90% of them, all their livestock died. Only the ones that adapted the native ways survived. That was a climate change. there are problems right now. I haven't made any money since Joe Biden took office. And part of that is due to the weather. A great part of that. 60 inches of rain in one summer from the beginning of July to the end of October. Yes, there are problems. Is removing carbon or CO2 going to solve those problems? I would debate that.
Okay, thank you to you both. We are now going to go to a lightning round. Paul, off to you.
And it will be lightning brief. I will ask questions of each of you and ask you to answer in a word or just a few words. Please keep your answers as brief as you can. Who are you voting for president? We'll start with you, Mr. Coester.
None of your business.
And Representative Balint.
I'll be voting for Kamala Harris.
And who are you voting for governor, Representative Balint?
Esther Charlton.
Mr. Coester, I can guess how you might answer. Who are you voting for? Is that any of our business?
It is not. Absolutely not.
Okay. Should the U.S. abolish the Electoral College in favor of a directly elected president? Mr. Coester.
No.
Representative Balint.
Yes.
Do you support proposals made by both President Trump and Vice President Harris on the campaign trail to eliminate taxes on tips? Representative Balint.
As long as it's tipped workers and not hedge fund managers who are getting the breaks.
Mr. Coester.
No taxes on tips. That I agree with.
Where do you get your national news, Mr. Coester?
From national people.
All right, Representative Balint.
AP, Reuters, a whole variety. I probably follow 6 different news websites, and I also pay attention to what's happening on Fox, and I also pay attention to what's happening on MSNBC.
If Vermont's U.S. Senator Peter Welch declines to run for a second Senate term in 2028, will you run for his seat? Representative Balint.
I don't know, Paul. I don't know. This is a hard job.
Mr. Coester?
2028?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't really know.
Fair enough.
I went to...
I don't really know should suffice. Thank you. Should members of Congress be subject to term limits? Mr. Coester.
100%.
And Representative Balint.
Yes.
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 What about justices on the U.S. Supreme Court? Representative Balint. Should they
Yeah.
be subject to term limits? Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Coester.
All the way down to the town clerks. Everybody should be subjected to term limits. School board members.
Do you believe in the death penalty, Mr. Coester?
Only in very extreme cases.
Representative Balint.
I don't. Too many innocent people have been subject to the death penalty.
Should cannabis be legalized at the federal level, Representative Balint?
Yes.
Mr. Coester.
Yes.
And the hardest question of the night, what is the best diner or breakfast joint in Vermont? Mr. Coester, you were saying you were talking to some people at breakfast today or the other day. What's the best place to get breakfast in Vermont? We've stumped you, haven't we?
I think that's Lee's there in Bellows Falls.
Is that your final answer?
There might be other ones that are better. That one's the most convenient one right now. Reasonable prices, good food.
Representative Balint, we've given you more time to think about your answer.
I know. You're trying to hurt us. You're trying to hurt us. We're going to hear about this probably more than anything. I get a great breakfast here in Brattleboro at the Porch on Putney Road.
Thank you. Back to you, Sarah.
Absolutely devastating erasure to the wayside. We'll now offer you each an opportunity to make brief closing statements. You will have 60 seconds. Mr. Coester, you may go first.
Well, it's a great mystery how I ended up being in this situation. I never thought that I would even have a chance to be elected. And miraculously, the Republicans chose not to put up a candidate. So I walked away with a nomination. And only Gerald Malloy and Governor Scott got more votes than I did. And then, you know, it's like, oh my God, I'm the only one that has a chance to win. So I give it my best shot. And it's fun, you know. Yeah, you get a bit of hate here and there, but such is life. And we'll see how it goes. May the best man win.
Thank you. And Representative Balint, your closing statement for the night.
Well, I just want to say I always appreciate anyone who's willing to run for office, and it's a difficult thing to do. So I appreciate you, Mr. Coester. It's clear that you care about your community. I have been able to serve Vermont for almost 2 years now in the House of Representatives, and it has truly been the honor of my life. And once again, this is something that Mr. Coester and I have in common. I never imagined that I would be in this role either. I am the child of an immigrant and a working class mom, and I never imagined that I would have this incredibly great honor. And I take it very seriously. And I may run as a Democrat, but it is not in the job description that you run and serve in the same way. When you are elected to be a member of the House of Representatives from Vermont, you serve the entire state. And I have tried my very best to do that, to listen to people, whether they are Democrats, Republicans, independents, or if they're completely turned off by politics. I have tried to listen to Vermonters about the issues that are most important to them and then introduce bills to reflect that, from housing to mental health supports to issues related to gun violence prevention. And I'm going to continue to do what I do best, which is, I think, listen deeply and try to translate the stories that Vermonters tell me into action on Capitol Hill. So thank you so much to Digger for hosting us tonight. I appreciate it.
And thank you to both of you for being here. Paul will wrap things up.
Thank you. This concludes VTDigger's 2024 U.S. House debate. We hope that you'll join us on Wednesday, October 23rd at 7 p.m. for the final edition of the Digger debate series. We'll be hosting Vermont's leading candidates for U.S. Senate in a debate co-sponsored by Vermont Public. You can watch it live on VTDigger's website or on Vermont Public's television and radio stations. Again, that's at 7 p.m. on Wednesday. To find our previous debates featuring Vermont's gubernatorial and lieutenant gubernatorial candidates, visit VTDigger.org. And while you're there, make sure to check out our election guide to learn more about how to vote and who's running for office. All of this is made possible with the support of our contributors. Please consider making a donation tonight by visiting VTDigger.org/donate. And finally, I'd like to thank the two candidates who joined us tonight, Mark Coester and Representative Becca Balint, as well as the VTDigger staffers who made this possible. They include Sarah Meerhoff, Sean Robinson, Kristen Fountain, Neil Goswami, Natalie Williams, Taylor Haynes, Libby Sparadeo, and Sky Barsh. Thank you for tuning in and have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Y'all have a wonderful day. No, I'm not voting for Becca.